The wind whistled through the tall trees surrounding the isolated cabin, carrying the damp scent of the forest and making the windows tremble ever so slightly. Daniel checked every detail of their refuge, his eyes scanning each door, every crack, every shadowed corner. He knew that even here, far from the road and curious eyes, danger could still be close. Sabrina carefully adjusted the blankets over the twins. Sarah and Noah slept deeply in their mother's arms, their soft breathing a sharp contrast to the tension that filled the room. Even exhausted, Sabrina felt her heart race at every creak of wood or rustle of leaves outside. She knew any sound could mean someone was approaching, but she couldn't allow fear to paralyze her. "They're safe here," Daniel said at last, sitting beside her. "For now. But we need to stay fully alert." Sabrina looked at him, her eyes filled with both love and worry. "Every minute feels like it lasts forever," she whispered, gently brushing a strand of hair from Sarah's face. "It's like we're constantly waiting for something to happen." Daniel took her hands firmly in his. "I know," he replied, his voice steady but strained beneath the surface. "But we can't let fear control us. We have to be strong for them." For Sarah and Noah, the cabin was simple, but it offered privacy and a measure of comfort. One open space where they could organize their supplies, care for the children, and rest. The scent of old wood mixed with the clean smell of blankets and baby powder. Every detail, from the placement of their makeshift beds to the way the food was stored, was carefully planned to keep the family safe. Even with shelter, tension lingered in small, constant moments. A branch, striking the window, made Sabrina hold her breath as Daniel quickly stood to check. "It's okay," he said, trying to calm her. "Just the wind." "And what if it's not?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "What if someone found us?" Daniel squeezed her hand. "Then we'll be ready, but as long as we're together, nothing can destroy us." During the day, they established a strict routine inside the cabin. Daniel reinforced doors and windows, checked the surroundings, and studied possible escape routes. Sabrina cared for the twins, prepared simple meals, and organized supplies, always keeping the children close and calm. Even exhausted, they leaned on each other, knowing every effort was necessary to ensure their family's survival. Vigilance became constant. Any movement outside the cabin, any shadow slipping between the trees, triggered alarm. One afternoon, Daniel noticed fresh footprints in the dirt around the cabin, small impressions that didn't look like animal tracks. His heart pounded. He immediately signaled for Sabrina to stay inside with the twins, while he carefully inspected the perimeter. "Someone's been here," he murmured when he returned, "and they're probably still nearby." Sabrina swallowed hard, holding the children even tighter. "So we're not really alone," she said, fear threading through her voice. "Not right now," Daniel answered firmly, "but we'll protect ourselves. Every decision, every move from here on out is critical." The nights in the cabin were long and silent, broken only by the sounds of the forest and the occasional cries of the twins. Every breath Sarah and Noah took seemed amplified in the stillness, a reminder of how vulnerable they were. And yet, love and determination kept their parents watchful. Sabrina rocked the babies gently, whispering soft reassurances. "Mommy's here. Everything's going to be okay," she murmured, feeling their breathing gradually slow. Every gesture carried tenderness and constant alertness. Daniel spent long hours observing the area around the cabin, sitting on the porch or moving quietly among the nearby trees, analyzing each shadow, each movement. Every noise sharpened his senses. Every detail became a piece in a silent survival puzzle. "They're getting closer," Sabrina said one rainy afternoon, finally breaking the silence as she looked at Daniel with anxious eyes. "They haven't reached us yet," he replied, "but we have to be ready. Every day, every moment is a silent battle." Over the following days, the family settled into a rhythm of caution and care. Daniel checked supplies and reinforced security measures, while Sabrina kept the twins comforted and occupied. Small incidents heightened the tension. A car speeding down a distant road, new footprints near the cabin, suspicious glances in nearby villages. Each detail reminded them they couldn't relax, but also reinforced the importance of staying united. One afternoon, while Daniel inspected the trail near the cabin, Sabrina approached carrying the twins. "I don't know if I'll ever get used to this," she said quietly, exhaustion evident in her voice. "Every sound, every shadow." She sighed, looking down at Sarah and Noah. "But as long as we're together, I think I can endure it." Daniel gave a faint smile and gently brushed her hair back. "That's exactly it," he said. "The love we have for each other gives us the strength to face anything." As night fell, the family gathered inside the cabin. Sarah and Noah slept deeply in their mother's arms. Daniel held Sabrina's hand, their fingers intertwined in silent reassurance. Tension and adrenaline still lingered in the air, but the certainty that they were together made the fear more bearable. "Tomorrow is another day," Daniel said softly, looking at his children, "and we'll face it together." "Always together," Sabrina replied, resting her head against his shoulder. And as the wind whistled through the trees and the cabin sank into darkness, they remained side by side, aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but certain that as long as they stayed united, they could withstand any threat. The escape continued. The tension never faded, but love, protection, and family proved stronger than fear, preparing them for the confrontations and mysteries still waiting ahead. The morning began too quiet. Not the natural silence of the forest, a heavy silence. Watching. Daniel sensed it before he even opened his eyes. Something was different. Instinct screamed inside him, the same instinct that had made him leave home that first night. He rose slowly, careful not to wake Sabrina or the twins. He walked to the side window of the cabin and pulled the curtain back just a fraction. Nothing, trees, light mist, damp ground, but the silence remained. Wrong. He stepped out the back door with calculated movements circling the cabin, and then he saw it. Tire tracks, fresh, not theirs. His heart slammed in his chest. Someone had been there. When he returned inside, his face no longer hid the tension. "Daniel?" Sabrina noticed immediately. "What is it?" He shut the door and locked it carefully. "They're closer than I thought." The air turned heavy. "Who, Daniel?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He hesitated for a second. "The same people who came looking for me weeks ago. I thought I had shaken them, but I didn't." Sabrina frowned. "You never told me exactly who they are." Daniel ran a hand over his face, breathing deeply. "Years ago, before I really knew you, I worked on a community sports center project, but behind the facade, there were investors using it to launder money." Sabrina froze. "What?" "I found out. I reported it. But it wasn't enough to bring all of them down. Some disappeared. Others stayed, waiting." She felt the ground vanish beneath her. "So this is revenge?" "It's control. They want to know what I know. They want to make sure I never speak again." Sarah stirred in the makeshift crib. Noah followed, as if sensing the tension in the air. Sabrina picked them up, trying to remain calm. "They can't find us here," she said, but she no longer sounded convinced. Daniel stepped closer. "I won't let anything happen to you." And at that very moment, a sound cut through the air. An engine, distant, but coming down the dirt road that led toward the cabin. They looked at each other. The noise grew closer. Cars didn't pass through there, not normally. Daniel immediately turned off the interior light, even though it was daytime. He signaled for Sabrina to move away from the windows. The car passed, slowly, too slowly. The engine lingered for a few seconds, then moved on, but not far. Daniel rushed to the sidewall and peered through the narrow wooden slats. A black car was parked further ahead, partially hidden among the trees. Not a coincidence. His blood ran cold. He went back inside. Pack the essentials, now. Sabrina didn't argue. Documents, diapers, blankets, quick food. Do they know we're here? Not for sure. They're confirming. Time seemed to speed up. Noah began to cry. Sarah followed. Their parents' nerves were impossible to mask. Daniel knelt in front of them. Hey, it's okay. Daddy's here. But he knew okay was fragile. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed outside, like someone stepping on dry branches near the side window. Sabrina froze. Daniel grabbed the object he kept hidden, not to attack, but to defend if necessary. Footsteps, slow, circling the cabin. The air felt sucked out of the room. Daniel! Her voice trembled. He motioned for silence. The footsteps stopped. Silence, then knocking at the door, firm, controlled. Not someone lost, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Mr. Daniel, a male voice called from outside. We just want to talk. The world seemed to stop. Sabrina felt her heartbeat in her ears. Don't open it, she whispered. The voice returned. We know you're in there. We don't want to hurt your family. That depends on you. The threat was clear. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. They knew there were children. They knew they were there. He looked at Sabrina. Her eyes held fear and absolute trust. He couldn't give in. I'm not coming out, he called back, firm. Silence, then a soft chuckle. Then we'll wait. Footsteps retreating, but not leaving. They were surrounding the cabin. Daniel turned quickly. We need to go out the back, now. Sabrina held Sarah and Noah tightly. Her hands trembled, but her movements were decisive. They moved to the rear door. Daniel opened it slowly. The forest felt thicker than ever. Route 2, he murmured. They had planned. Always 2 routes. Running wasn't an option. They had to stay quiet. They took the first steps along the hidden trail behind the cabin. Sabrina's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard. But then, a man's shout echoed in the distance. They're leaving, discovered. Daniel grabbed Sabrina's hand. Run! No more strategic silence. Now it was real escape. Branches slapped against their arms. Uneven ground made every step harder. The twins cried, frightened by the sudden movement. Footsteps behind them. Men, 2, maybe 3. Daniel knew that terrain better than they did. He had studied every meter over the past days. Left, he signaled. They descended a small slope into a denser part of the forest. The pursuers slowed. They didn't want to get lost. Daniel took advantage. He followed a narrow path leading to a secondary road, where days earlier they had hidden an alternative means of transportation, just in case. They arrived breathless. Silence returned, but this time it was the silence of distance. The men had fallen behind. Sabrina was shaking. They knew about the children. Daniel held her face gently. I will never let them touch you. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Now I understand, she said at last. This isn't just about you. It's about intimidating us. He nodded. They want to pull me out of hiding. They want me to take back everything I reported. Will you? His eyes hardened. Never. She gripped his hand tightly. Then we fight together. The wind moved through the trees. Sarah began to calm. Noah followed. The family was still united, but now there was no doubt. The threat had a face, a voice, an intention. And it was willing to use fear as a weapon. Daniel looked toward the horizon. This is only the beginning. Sabrina took a deep breath, kissed her children and replied, Then we'll be the ones to finish it." And so, exhausted but alive, they moved away from the cabin that was no longer safe, aware that the game had changed. This was no longer just escape, it was confrontation. The cabin wasn't silent, it breathed. It creaked under the weight of the wind rolling down from the mountains like a warning. The old wood snapped with every shift in temperature, as if it carried memories that refused to stay quiet. The twins sat near the fireplace, still unlit. Morning light filtered weakly through the cracks in the boards. Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the door. Sabrina, though trying to appear calm, held her arms crossed too tightly. Since the night before, something had changed. They were no longer just hiding from the cold, they were hiding from someone. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Daniel murmured without looking away. Sabrina took a few seconds before answering. "I did." Footsteps, not inside the cabin, outside, slow, measured, watching. The problem wasn't the sound itself, it was that no one should have been there. The shelter looked abandoned for years. That was exactly why they had chosen it. Or at least, that's what they thought. The door, until then only resting against the frame, trembled with the wind. Daniel stood. "Don't open it," Sabrina whispered, but he was already walking. Each step sounded too loud. When his hand touched the cold handle, he hesitated. Then came the knock, not loud, firm, controlled, like someone who already knew they would be answered. They exchanged a look. Daniel opened the door. 3 men stood outside, and the one in front didn't look like an improvised leader. He looked accustomed to command, tall, straight posture, a steady gaze that assessed without blinking. His neatly trimmed beard contrasted with the raw environment around him. He didn't look lost. He looked at home. "Good morning," he said, with a calm that was almost too polite. Sabrina felt her stomach twist. This wasn't just a random stranger. She recognized that kind of presence, the kind that made others obey without raising his voice. "This cabin isn't abandoned," the man continued. "It belongs to a specific territory." Daniel said nothing. "And you entered without permission." Silence. The wind cut through the trees behind them. "Who are you?" Daniel finally asked. The man tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "My name is Rafael Montenegro." The name landed heavy. Sabrina froze. Montenegro. She knew that surname. Daniel did too. They had heard it before, not in casual stories, but in warnings, in whispered accounts. Rafael Montenegro wasn't just the leader of an isolated mountain group. He controlled a network, routes, shelters, people, and according to rumors, no one crossed his territory twice without paying a price. "We didn't know," Daniel replied, keeping his voice steady. "We just needed shelter." Rafael stepped forward. "Everyone always just needs shelter." The 2 men behind him remained still, watching, weighing. The tension was almost visible in the air. "We'll leave," Sabrina said, finally finding her voice. Rafael looked directly at her and smiled. It wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that measured weakness. "Now that you're here, it's not that simple." Then it happened. A loud crack echoed from the right side of the cabin. Daniel instinctively turned his head. Mistake. One of the men took advantage and lunged, grabbing Daniel's arm hard. Sabrina screamed. Daniel tried to pull free, but the man was stronger. "Let him go!" She rushed forward, but Rafael raised his hand and everyone froze. "Easy," he said, almost gently. "No one needs to get hurt." But Daniel was already being pressed against the cabin wall. His arm twisted behind his back. Pain tightened his face. Sabrina's heart pounded violently. She stepped forward again. "He didn't do anything." Rafael walked slowly toward Daniel, observed, analyzed. "Sometimes the problem isn't what was done," he said. "It's what could be done." Then his eyes shifted back to Sabrina. "You're twins, correct?" The blood drained from her face. They hadn't said that. They hadn't told him anything. How did he know? Raphael tilted his head. Twins. Daniel tried to break free again. The man twisted his arm harder. A sound of pain escaped him. Sabrina didn't think. She ran to the side of the cabin, grabbed the first thing she found, a heavy piece of wood, and lunged forward. Everything happened too fast. She raised it, but before she could strike, Raphael caught her wrist, firm, unmovable. His eyes now held no trace of politeness. Impulsive, he murmured. He released her with a shove, not violent, but enough to throw her off balance. Daniel reacted. With a sharp movement, he managed to partially free himself and shoved the man holding him. It was enough to create chaos. Both enforcers moved at once. One grabbed Daniel by the collar, the other restrained Sabrina. And then, the sound. But Daniel didn't trust almost. An hour later, while checking the perimeter, he saw it. Tracks, not old ones. Fresh impressions in the damp soil near the back edge of the property. His pulse spiked instantly. Someone had been nearby. Maybe not tonight, but recently. The sense of relief vanished. When he returned inside, Sabrina immediately saw it on his face. Daniel, what is it? He lowered his voice. We're not as alone as I thought. There are signs someone's been near the property. Her stomach dropped. So they're still looking for us? Yes, he said calmly, too calmly, which means we stay ready. She nodded, fear tightening her chest. But something else rising too. Resolve. For Sarah and Noah, she said quietly. For them, he agreed. The rest of the day turned strategic. Daniel reinforced locks, checked windows, identified blind spots, mapped out escape routes, both inside and outside the cabin. He chose a secondary exit through the back if they needed to run. He marked a path through the trees that would be hard to follow. Sabrina helped, despite her fear. Love, she realized, wasn't soft in moments like this. It was fierce. As night approached again, Daniel made a decision. I'm going to do a quick perimeter check, he said. Lock the door behind me. If anything feels wrong, grab the twins and go to the back exit. Don't hesitate. Her eyes filled instantly. Be careful, she whispered. Please come back. He nodded once, then disappeared into the dark. Every step outside was deliberate. He listened to the wind, to branches shifting, to distant animal sounds. He scanned tree lines, shadows, the slope behind the cabin. Nothing moved, nothing obvious, but instinct told him this wasn't over. When he returned, his expression was controlled, but tense. It's quiet, he said. Too quiet. So that night, inside the dim cabin, something shifted. Instead of letting fear consume them, they held their children close. Daniel lay on the floor beside the twins, making silly faces until Sarah blinked awake and gave a sleepy half-smile. Noah kicked gently, stretching his tiny legs. Sabrina laughed softly through her tears. Look at them, she whispered. They're growing so fast. So small, but already so full of life. Daniel reached out and touched Noah's tiny hand. And we're going to make sure they get to live that life, he said firmly. For a few precious minutes, fear loosened its grip. It was just them, a family, fighting for something bigger than themselves. But sometime past midnight, Daniel woke abruptly. A sound, faint, not wind, not an animal, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Outside. His entire body went still. He gently placed a hand over Sabrina's arm. She opened her eyes immediately. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension in his face said everything. Outside the cabin, something moved again. And this time, it was closer. If you haven't seen how our story began, episode 1 is linked below. And don't miss episode 3. A gunshot. It echoed through the mountains. Total silence. A bird burst from the trees. Sabrina froze. Daniel too. The bullet hadn't hit anyone. It had been fired into the air. Raphael slowly lowered the gun. Final warning. The air felt heavier, denser. "You entered my territory," he said, his voice now stripped of softness. "That has consequences." Daniel struggled to breathe. Sabrina's hands trembled. Raphael stepped back. "You have until sunset to leave," he gestured. The men released Daniel, but before leaving, Raphael stepped close one last time, very close. "And the next time I hear a sound coming from this cabin," he looked directly at Daniel, "it won't be a warning shot." He turned and walked away. Their footsteps disappeared into the trees. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. Sabrina ran to her brother. "Are you okay?" Daniel nodded, still catching his breath. His arm hurt, but that wasn't what unsettled him most. It was the certainty. They had been found, and now they had a deadline. Sabrina looked out the window. The wind felt stronger. The mountains no longer looked like shelter. They looked like a trap. "He knew we're twins," she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. "That means he already knew who we are." And if Rafael Montenegro knew, then their escape had never been invisible. Outside, in the distance, between the trees, a silhouette still watched. They weren't just in dangerous territory. They were at the center of something much bigger, and sunset had never felt so close. The silence after Raphael left didn't bring relief. It brought calculation. Daniel closed the cabin door slowly, as if any sudden movement might alert unseen eyes. "He knew," Sabrina repeated, pacing. "He knew too much," Daniel replied. They hadn't told anyone they were twins. They hadn't used full names since they started running. They avoided records, avoided people, avoided patterns. So how? Sabrina stopped abruptly. "The backpack." Daniel looked at her. "What?" "The backpack we left behind in that town before the border." The air shifted. They had left in a rush that night. An alert, suspicious movement. The escape happened in minutes. No time to go back. Inside the backpack were old documents, photos. One of them, the two of them as children. Daniel felt his stomach drop. "If someone found that, and if someone handed it over," Sabrina finished. The idea of betrayal felt worse than direct pursuit. Daniel moved to the window and slightly lifted the makeshift curtain. Nothing, just trees. But he knew. Raphael didn't threaten without certainty. "He's not just protecting territory," Daniel said quietly. "He's waiting for something." Sabrina folded her arms, not from cold, from instinct. "He wants something from us." The wind intensified outside. The cabin answered with short cracks in the wood. Then Daniel said something that shifted everything. "What if it's not both of us?" Sabrina frowned. "What do you mean?" "What if he only wants one?" The silence that followed was heavy. They had always been seen as a unit. Where one went, the other followed. Decisions shared, protection mutual. Separating them had always been the only way to break them. "He won't," Sabrina said firmly. Daniel didn't answer because he wasn't sure. Raphael watched from a rise between the trees. He didn't need binoculars. He knew exactly what he was doing. One of the men beside him asked, "Want us to push now?" Raphael shook his head. "No." "But you gave them a deadline." "Deadlines create anxiety. Anxiety creates mistakes." His eyes remained on the cabin. "And they're already making them." The man hesitated. "You're sure it's him?" Raphael took a few seconds before answering. "I am." The name Almeida still echoed in his mind. Years ago, a broken deal, a betrayal that had cost him dearly. And now the surname resurfaced. Daniel Almeida and the twin sister. Raphael didn't believe in coincidences. Inside, Sabrina was organizing what little they had. If we're leaving before sunset, we leave prepared. Daniel watched her. She always took control when things became unstable, but this time he saw something different. Fear, not for herself, for him. "Sabrina," he said. She stopped. "If it comes to it, you leave without me." She turned slowly. "Don't start. Listen. No. If he only wants one of us." She crossed the space between them and grabbed his shirt tightly. "We don't split. We never have." He held her hands. "And that's exactly why he can use it against us." Before they could continue, a sharp crack echoed behind the cabin. They froze. That wasn't wind. That was wood breaking. Daniel grabbed the heavy flashlight from the table. Sabrina pulled the knife hidden beneath the floorboard. They moved slowly toward the back. The rear door was slightly open, and they were absolutely certain they had locked it. Sabrina's heartbeat felt loud enough to echo. Daniel pushed the door wider. Something lay on the dirt outside. A photograph. He crouched and picked it up. It was the childhood photo, the same one from the abandoned backpack. The two of them, small, smiling, arms wrapped around each other. On the back, written in pen, "You can't run from what you are." Sabrina felt her knees weaken. He already had it. Daniel turned it over again. There was more. A time. Before sunset. This wasn't a warning. It was personal. Sabrina scanned the trees. "He was here." Daniel nodded, and he came inside. If Raphael had entered the cabin while they were distracted, then he could have done anything. The game changed in that moment. It was no longer about leaving. It was about surviving. Sabrina paced again. "This is about Dad." Daniel closed his eyes. They never talked about it, but they always knew. Their father had been involved in something bigger than they were ever told. Shady business. Dangerous deals. A sudden disappearance years ago. They grew up learning not to ask questions. Now the questions were knocking. "If Raphael knew Dad," Sabrina began. "Then he might think we have something we don't," Daniel finished. "Or worse, that they know something we don't." The wind grew stronger. The day was moving. Sunset was approaching, and so was the deadline. Sabrina stopped in front of her brother. "We're not running." Daniel looked up. "What are you thinking?" Her eyes had changed, focused, determined. "If he wants answers, we'll give him something." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. "You want to confront Rafael Montenegro?" She took a slow breath. "No." She took the photograph from his hand. "I want to find out why he wants us alive." Outside, the wind paused for a moment, as if even the mountain was waiting. And somewhere between the trees, Raphael smiled. Sunset hadn't arrived yet, but confrontation was already inevitable. The sky had already begun to change color. Golden light slipped through the cracks of the cabin like a silent warning that time was running out. Daniel stared at the horizon. He's going to move before sunset. Sabrina still held the crumpled photograph between her fingers. "Then we move first." They couldn't stay there anymore. The cabin had already been invaded once. It wasn't shelter anymore. It was a trap. They decided to leave through the back, taking the narrowest trail through the woods. Fast movement, quiet, no main road. Daniel checked the backpack. Fake documents, some cash, water. Sabrina adjusted the children's jackets. "Sarah's asleep," she whispered. "Noah, too." Daniel lifted Noah into his arms. Sabrina held Sarah. The forest felt darker than it really was. They moved carefully, stepping over branches, breathing low. The plan was simple. Reach the old maintenance road 2 kilometers ahead, get to the hidden car, and disappear again. Simple on paper, but Raphael didn't play simple. A branch snapped behind them. Daniel froze instantly. Sabrina felt her entire body turn cold. Another sound, footsteps, not imagination. They were being followed. "Run!" Daniel whispered. They moved faster, still trying not to make too much noise. Noah stirred in Daniel's arms. Sarah breathed softly against Sabrina's shoulder. More footsteps, closer now. A voice echoed between the trees. "Daniel." It was Raphael, calm, confident, too close. Sabrina's heart pounded. "Don't answer," Daniel murmured. They kept going. And then something unexpected happened. Sarah began to cry, loud, startled. The sound sliced through the forest and revealed exactly where they were. "Damn!" Sabrina whispered, trying to soothe her, but the crying only grew louder. Raphael was closer now, much closer. Daniel made a decision in seconds. "Go left," he told Sabrina. "What?" "Go left. I'll draw them to the right." "No. Trust me." It wasn't an argument. It was survival instinct. He quickly handed Noah to Sabrina, took Sarah into his arms, and ran in the opposite direction. "Daniel!" she whispered desperately, but he was already moving away. Sarah cried harder. Raphael immediately changed direction. He followed the sound. Sabrina stood frozen for half a second. Then she ran. The other way. She had to save Noah, and she had to trust. Daniel ran through the trees, dodging branches as best he could. Sarah trembled in his arms, her crying uncontrollable. "It's okay. It's okay," he whispered, even knowing it wasn't. He knew what he was doing. He was offering himself as bait, but he underestimated one thing: their speed. A man appeared ahead of him, another to his left. Daniel stopped abruptly. Raphael stepped out behind him, as if he had always been there. "Good choice," Raphael said. Daniel held Sarah tight against his chest, his heart pounding like a war drum. "It's over," Raphael said. "She has nothing to do with this," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the panic burning inside him. Raphael looked at the child. "She's exactly why this is happening." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" Raphael stepped closer. "Your father owed a lot of people, Daniel, and when he disappeared, he left something very important behind." "I don't know anything." "I know." Raphael made a gesture. One of the men advanced. Daniel tried to step back, but another was already behind him. Within seconds, his arm was twisted back. Sarah was pulled from his arms. "No!" he shouted. The sound echoed through the trees. The little girl cried even louder now. Daniel fought, but it was useless. Raphael held Sarah with surprising care, not like a monster, like a man with a purpose. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Raphael said quietly, "but I need answers." "She's just a baby," Daniel shouted. Raphael tilted his head slightly. "Then you'll talk before the sun disappears." And then they did the unthinkable. They took Sarah. Sabrina heard the scream, and she knew. She dropped to her knees for a second. Noah slept in her arms, unaware. Her hands were shaking, but she stood up. She couldn't fall apart. Not now. She ran back. She found Daniel on his knees in the dirt, alone. "Where is she?" Her voice broke. He couldn't answer at first. He just shook his head. Sabrina felt her world collapse. "They took her." The words cut like glass. Noah began to cry, as if he felt his twin sister's absence. They had shared the same breath since the womb. Separating them was cruel. It was wrong. It was war. Sabrina grabbed Daniel's face. "Look at me." He was shattered. "I promised I would protect her," he said, barely breathing. "And you will. But right now we have to be smarter than they are." The sky was almost completely orange now. Sunset was minutes away. Raphael's deadline was active, and the game had changed. This wasn't escape anymore. It was rescue. Daniel closed his eyes for a few seconds. He thought about their father, the debt, the lies, the silence. And then something clicked. He wants information. Sabrina nodded. Then we give him what he wants. Daniel looked at her. Even if it's a lie? She held Noah tighter. We play by his rules until we flip the board. The sun touched the horizon, and in that exact moment, something inside them shifted. Fear turned into strategy. Pain turned into fuel. They weren't running anymore. They were fighting, and they would have to survive the longest night of their lives to bring Sarah home. The forest was completely dark by the time Daniel and Sabrina reached the highest point of the hill. From there, they could see an old abandoned industrial building near the secondary road. Dim lights were on, minimal movement. Raphael wasn't improvising. He had a base. "He wants me to go to him," Daniel said, his voice low and controlled. Sabrina held Noah, who had finally fallen asleep again after hours of intermittent crying. "He wants you emotionally unstable," she replied. "So we're not giving him that." Daniel took a deep breath. He was at his breaking point, but he couldn't act on impulse. Not now. Sabrina was the first to see the pattern. He didn't hurt Sarah. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. "How do you know?" "Because he needs you functional. If he wanted blind revenge, he would have already done it." Silence. She continued. "This is negotiation, not execution." Daniel began thinking differently. Raphael needed information about his father's debt, so Sarah was leverage, not a target. That changed everything. "He expects me to show up alone," Daniel said. "Exactly, and you will." Daniel turned to her, alarmed. "No. Yes." She held his gaze firmly. "But not the way he expects." 1. Daniel would present himself at the building. 2. Unarmed. 3. Vulnerable. 4. Cooperative. But Sabrina wouldn't be waiting. She knew something Raphael didn't. During the months on the run, she had done more than care for the children. She had researched, investigated, connected pieces. And there was one detail about Raphael he believed was buried, a crack in his empire, an illegal investment that could destroy him. She had proof, stored, protected. If anything happened to Sarah, Raphael would fall. She wasn't just a mother. She was a strategist now. Daniel walked alone into the abandoned building. Footsteps echoing against concrete, rust-covered doors, a harsh white light illuminating the center of the warehouse, and there he was, Raphael, sitting, calm. Sarah lay in an improvised crib beside him, alive, crying, but alive. Daniel's heart nearly burst from his chest. "You came," Raphael said. "I said I would." Raphael tilted his head slightly. "Where is your wife?" "Far from this." Raphael studied his face. "You learned fast." Daniel stayed composed. "What exactly do you want?" Raphael stood slowly. "Your father stole money. A lot of money. And he left behind an access code that only a family member can unlock." Daniel felt the shock ripple through him. "I don't know anything about that." "You will." Raphael stepped toward the crib. Daniel stiffened. "Don't touch her." Raphael stopped. "Then cooperate." And then the metal warehouse door burst open. Everyone turned. Sabrina walked in, Noah in her arms, and something in her other hand, not a weapon, a flash drive. "Enough." Raphael froze. "You're bolder than I imagined. And you're more predictable than you think." She walked toward the center. "This flash drive contains every illegal transaction from your latest international fund. Copies have been automatically sent to 3 separate locations if anything happens to my daughter." Absolute silence. Raphael understood. She wasn't bluffing. "You wouldn't do that," he said. Sabrina tilted her head slightly. "Try me." Noah began to cry. The sound echoed through the warehouse. Sarah cried in the crib as well, separated yet connected by the same fear. Daniel used the distraction. He moved, fast. He grabbed Sarah into his arms, stepped back. One of the men drew a weapon. Raphael raised his hand. No. He stared directly at Sabrina, calculating. She had changed the game. He wanted money, power, not international prison. He took 2 steps back. This isn't over. Sabrina answered calmly. It is for my family. They walked out together, united. Sarah crying in Daniel's arms, Noah in Sabrina's. The 2 babies finally reunited. When Sarah touched Noah, both of them slowly stopped crying, as if they recognized they were whole again. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. You saved us. Sabrina exhaled deeply. We saved each other. But they both knew Europe was now their only path. They needed to disappear for real, new identities, a new beginning, no traces, no debts, no ghosts. A few weeks later, snow, silence, a frozen lake, a small village in Finland, new documentation, a new life. Daniel now taught physical education to children in the local community. He taught running, teamwork, courage. But most of all, he taught them never to run from what they love, Sabrina wrote. Every night, while the twins slept, now 2 years old, growing strong and inseparable, she wrote about love, about fear, about protection, about how running away wasn't abandonment. It was survival, and how, in the end, family is not where you are born. It is what you choose to fight for.